Support for this episode of 9 to Thrive HR is brought to you by CGS Enterprise Learning. CGS Enterprise Learning is an award-winning provider of custom professional development solutions. As the learning provider of choice for many of the world's most admired companies, CGS Enterprise Learning knows that there's not a one-size-fits-all approach to crafting a successful L&D strategy. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us on another episode of 9 to Thrive HR, a podcast produced by the Human Capital Institute, where we discuss some of the most pressing issues facing talent management today. We help surface ideas and solutions to those problems by speaking to experts and practitioners in the field. My name's Andrew Bateman. I'm your host for today. Joining me is Dr. Greg Ketchum, principal at Talent Planet. Dr. Greg, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome, Andrew. It's good to be here.
So it's always good to talk with you. I think this is something that we've spent a fair amount of time over the last couple of years discussing these types of topics. So to sort of eliminate the problem of having people look up the archive of podcasts that we've done in the past, could you give us a little bit of an elevator pitch about sort of what you do and sort of where you stand in the field of digital content creation and digital learning? I think that would be a great place to start.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, I'm an organizational consultant. I do executive coaching and team building. I have a background in the media, having hosted a talk show on CNN and XM satellite radios on the workplace and career. So I myself create a series of podcasts called Coach on Demand that we license to organizations, and I use those as part of my coaching work. So it's a blended approach that I bring to the workplace. So that's just that's a 90,000 foot view of me, Andrew.
Excellent. So hopefully we'll be able to start, spiraling down and doing a tailspin and get a closer, in-depth view before we crash and burn. Are there any rules of thumb when it comes to crowdsourcing content? I know that we see in the world today this approach to having a lot of the content in organizations created in-house, and L&D departments may have been sort of scaled back a little bit, and in their place have bubbled up sort of the idea that learning content can come from anywhere. So how do we manage that? Is there anything that you would recommend when it comes to bringing in, ideas from throughout the organization, and how do you sort of manage that and scale it?
Yeah, that's a great question, Andrew. And I think, to me, the most important thing is you want to have a homegrown set of guidelines. So I think the first thing is you get a cross-sectional group of employees and leaders together to make some decisions about how crowdsourcing, how you're going to go about crowdsourcing and what your policy guidelines to be. And to me, that's the most important first step.
And that sort of internal panel or steering committee, so to speak, who are the folks that might sit on that?
Well, like you said, you get a cross section of folks from the organization. You'd want somebody from each function. You want some people who are in top leadership roles, and in effect, what you're doing is you're crowdsourcing the creation of your guidelines. So you're doing what you're advocating, putting a policy together for. And this can be this doesn't have to be a standing group. You can bring them together just for this purpose, like a pop-up team. And once you get your guidelines set, then people go on their way.
And so that's the type of thing where you're going to get buy-in from the different stakeholders. Obviously, you're probably going to want to listen to what's needed, right? You have to figure out from the learning audience what is it that they need to know. There's an element kind of not necessarily knowledge transfer, but an inventory of what do we have, where does it live, those types of questions.
Right.
That need to be answered.
Right.
And I think you're right. A committee to sort of set those standards is a great way to start off. And presumably there's going to be folks that are like the subject matter experts within each field that are going to be sort of brought in to help lead the charge, I imagine.
Yeah, that's right. And there are a number of questions that you have to explore in a group like that. First is, when you talk about crowdsourcing, what are we really talking about? Are we talking about crowdsourcing entirely from within the enterprise, or are we talking about also outside? Do you include customers or vendors? You have to look at crowdsourcing and how it fits into your culture. And something you just mentioned there is, how does it fit with what you already are doing with learning and development, and how can you leverage what you already have? So you don't want to recreate the wheel. And then, what are your goals for crowdsourcing? And then finally, you really have to get the top leaders of the organization on board, and using crowdsourcing and being willing to accept information that comes through crowdsourcing and use it within the organization. So those are some of the kinds of questions that you'd be looking at in a group like that.
Now that there are benefits too, right? I think if you are enabling the employee voice to have an audience, that there's probably a ripple effect of sort of engagement and doing meaningful work and contributing to the larger organizational vision that kind of comes from that you're engendering sort of a participatory mindset from your workforce if you're sort of opening up the floodgates. So I know that all sounds like peaches and cream. Is there any risk to that? Do you risk alienating people that might not be vocal, or maybe empowering too many people, the loudest voice in the room type of mentality?
Well, those are great questions, Andrew, and I think there's always a risk when you pilot something new, and I think that's I'm not really sure about that. I think you'd have to have in your guidelines that you put together, you'd have to think about things like that. How you handle those situations if and when they come up. That would be my thought about it.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm probably just in my nature one that looks at all the different angles and takes that contrarian point of view that sometimes can be a buzzkill.
Yes, Andrew. That's how I think of you, the old buzzkiller.
Well, I'm sorry. I apologize for that. Hopefully, I can.
No, it's okay.
I just take it on a roller coaster ride. I'll build us back up here in this next segment.
Thank you.
Yes, no problem. So, what we're doing right now, right, is a subject matter expert interview, and a lot of what HCI produces is hinges on that. A lot of what we're talking about, this crowdsourcing mentality, these are essentially leveraging internal or external subject matter experts to help sort of bring their experience to bear in the form of a podcast, as what you've done and what we're doing right now. What's the value there? What do the folks listening today to our podcast, what are they learning? What are some of the takeaways, just in general terms, from participating in a subject matter expert interview, or listening to one, I should say?
Well, in terms of what they can learn from you and I, Andrew, I'm not sure there's much there. That's a joke. Actually, you can learn a lot from listening to subject matter expert interviews, especially, how other people have handled situations that you might be facing. You can also learn about mistakes other people have made and what they learned from them. And at the same time, Andrew, you just can't take what an expert says and do it step by step and expect to get the same exact results. Learning, as you know, is all about taking what you can from other people's experiences, giving a critical think through about how what you're learning applies not only to your situation, but to who you are as a person. And then you've got to ask yourself some questions when thinking about applying what you've learned from listening to a subject matter interview. For example, like, what can I take from this and apply to my own situation? What fits for me as a person, what I just learned and what doesn't? And what challenges do I foresee might come up in applying what I've learned? So it's that, reflect and apply. You take what you've learned, you reflect on it, and you apply it to your own situation.
So more and more people are focused on creating video content, digital content. Essentially, homegrown media producers are sort of it's part of the job description for an L&D department these days. And what we've been talking about, crowdsourcing content, leveraging subject matter experts to help do that. there's an element of sort of director, coaching and being kind of a getting an acting coach in some respects. So, do you have any advice for how to get people to open up more and be more real and bring their authentic selves to that sort of interview setting?
Well, yeah. To me, the most important thing is to be yourself and be comfortable with yourself. You've got to, I do this a lot in my coaching work. So you get yourself centered. And that is, a lot of times we can be stuck in our heads, and there might be sort of this merry-go-round of anxieties or uncertainties before walking into an interview situation like that. And you've got to get out of your head. So you've got to, I do this with my coaches. Imagine a point down in around your navel, your gut, kind of put your awareness down there, breathe, take some deep breaths, and ask yourself some questions like, what do I truly believe about this topic that we're going to talk about here? Instead of, what's the right answer? What's the good answer? Ask yourself, how would I actually handle situations? So it's really about getting out of your head, putting your awareness down in your gut, and asking yourself some honest questions before you go in. And that is what we talk about in terms of getting yourself centered. And so that, to me, and comfortable with yourself. And if you're comfortable with yourself and speaking from what you truly believe, then that automatically gives you confidence, and that's going to come across.
That's just great advice for anybody in a conversation setting. I think
Yeah.
not just in an interview setting. That's a good management advice. Definitely. For me personally, one of the things that I've always tried to do is talk through the sort of content with someone in a sort of prep session. Even do like a practice interview as a way to get them more at ease with the content. One of the things I avoid doing is sending the questions well in advance and giving them too much time to prepare for it, because I think the tendency, like you mentioned, is for someone to try to get the right answer to these questions. And in many respects, something like what we're doing today, there isn't a right answer. It's the conversation itself is what's important.
Right. All right. It's just be yourself. And, that sounds so simple, Andrew, but it can be, to me, it's a lifelong process of uncovering that. And so the more times you dip in, get yourself centered, ask yourself those kinds of centering questions and breathe, the more and more of yourself that you find and get comfortable with.
And then the more folks are able to respond to that, obviously, I think people will recognize here's
But
somebody that's real. That's what I appreciate about
absolutely.
them, is that they're bringing their real self, and I feel like I can speak with them, and that lends itself to credibility in the interview setting, right? And that authenticity kind of comes through.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
So you being in the Bay Area and spending a lot of your career around the development of a lot of these successful tech companies, Facebook, Google, Netflix, what have you, are we've seen this a lot at HCI, right? They're often used as examples. We talk about Uber as, and this is the gig economy showing its face in the workplace. Or Amazon sort of redefining what it means to buy anything. So we often use these examples from Silicon Valley as sort of ideal state for HR and for organizational design. Is there anything that you might share from the playbook of successful tech companies as it relates to designing learning experiences? Is there something there from either the learning design perspective or the learner's experience that we might sort of examine a little bit?
Well, that's a great question, Andrew. And one of my favorite techniques that Google uses is they have employees teach classes. I mean, employees that want to do that teach classes. And when they do that, it makes learning part of the way employees work together rather than something HR is making them do. And that's a quote from Karen May, who's head of people operations at Google. And so I just love that idea. If there's a book called Search Inside Yourself, and that was created by a Google employee as a class about exactly what we were talking about a little while ago about getting yourself centered. So a class was created, and it was so successful that the individual wrote a book called Search Inside Yourself, and now that has spun off to be an entirely different company. So I think you're tagging or taking the expertise of your employees, having them share that with other employees, which has, aside from the subject matter stuff you're learning, right there, that's great, team building and relationship building. So to me, that's a win-win, a great thing.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that search inside yourself. That was something I had an opportunity to speak with someone from that organization at the employee engagement conference this past summer in Denver. And it was really telling, the story he told, talking about how this was the type of thing which was once they'd sort of broken off into being their own company, they continued to teach at Google for free until eventually Google was like, okay, our folks really need this. This is something that we're seeing a tremendous amount of adoption and value from the lessons that you're teaching. It's really took hold as a cultural touchstone for the organization. And I think that you're right, that transparency, that buy-in that you get from the employee base as to helping foster the learning culture is something that you really can't quantify how important that is in terms of creating that learning organization.
Absolutely. I love it.
Do you think, we talked a lot about the webcast a few weeks ago, about technology and using technology to help with coaching and what we talked about with the podcast and the ability to sort of train in some of the leadership competencies. Do you find that technology enables more opportunities for coaching, or does it kind of risk losing its potency if we're going through sort of an artifice of technology?
Well, that's a great question again, Andrew. By the way, who put these questions together? Whoever it was, it's a genius. These are great questions.
It was an algorithm.
And, okay, I'll buy that. Well, in my experience, Andrew, it does both, or it has the potential to both enable more opportunities and to risk losing some of its potency. In my experience, the best coaching always includes that personal touch, that interaction in real time with the coach. Now, that may be in person or on the phone or in a video conference, but I firmly believe that the interpersonal interaction itself, outside of any tools or insights that you might use or find, provides a good portion of what makes coaching successful. Now, on the other hand, myself, I have created a series of podcasts, and I use those as a part of the coaching. So it's technology enabled, kind of a blended approach. But we also need to talk about what we mean by coaching. If we're talking about learning a new skill that's relatively uncomplicated, that doesn't require a lot of digging into yourself through self-reflection, then technology does enable more opportunities. However, if you're looking for transformation of some sort, not just skill development, for example, developing greater levels of emotional intelligence, then that human interaction really is indispensable. So it's both. It could add to it and it can take away the potency. It's like everything else. It depends on how you use it. But I myself welcome technology as an aid, not as a replacement for the human element in coaching.
I love that answer, and I think that it goes back to a lot of what we started off with today when we talked about setting sort of a standard through the committee or through listening to the different stakeholders. That I think if you take the time to play through all the different scenarios in which you might be using technology or supplementing technology with real-time, interpersonal interactions and informal learning context that you're able to deliver something that's much more baked into the process of what it means to be an employee at work, rather than hey, visit this link and report back to me once you've learned how to be better at giving and receiving feedback. So I think these are great lessons.
Exactly.
For everybody, and I really want to thank you for the time that you've taken to talk with me today and share all of this with our HCI audience. It's been a pleasure, Dr. Greg, as usual.
Great fun, Andrew. Always wonderful to work with you. Thanks for inviting me.
My pleasure. And we would also like to thank each and every one of you for tuning in and encourage you to subscribe to this podcast if you've enjoyed what you've heard today. You can find us on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher Smart Radio, and on the YouTube channel HCI Talent. A big thank you to CGS Enterprise Learning. Without their generous support, HCI wouldn't be able to deliver great content like this. And if you're interested in learning more about what we've discussed in today's episode, you can find resources at hci.org. For 9 to Thrive HR and all of HCI, I'm Andrew Bateman.